Franklin Hayes's life was built on power, wealth, and ruthless ambition, but the night he was found dead, everything he controlled began to unravel. Claire Duvall, the young housekeeper, was accused of a crime she didn't commit, while Victor Sloan, Hayes's closest business partner, hid secrets that could destroy them both. In a case full of betrayal, hidden agendas, and deadly deception, only one man could uncover the truth: Ben Matlock, the legendary lawyer known for saving the innocent. What really happened inside Hayes's mansion that night? And who was willing to kill to keep their secrets buried? Ben Matlock had long been known as a legend in the courtroom, a man whose sharp instincts and unwavering sense of justice had saved countless lives from wrongful conviction. For years he had been retired, enjoying the slower rhythm of quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. Yet, the peace was broken when news of Franklin Hayes's mysterious death reached him. Hayes was no ordinary victim. He was a towering figure in the real estate world, a man who commanded power and influence, but also resentment and anger from those who lived in the shadows of his empire. On the surface, his death seemed like the violent end of a burglary, but the pieces never quite fit. The mansion had shown no signs of forced entry. The security system had been deliberately disabled just minutes before the incident, and nothing of real value was missing. To seasoned eyes, it looked less like a random act of crime and more like an execution carefully disguised as chaos. Hayes's life story only made the mystery darker. He was wealthy, ruthless in business, and carried a reputation for pushing entire families out of neighborhoods to make room for his developments. To many, he was a villain. To others, he was simply a shrewd businessman who knew how to bend the rules. But beneath his public persona lay countless enemies, former partners who had lost fortunes, activists who despised his disregard for communities, and even those close to him who felt betrayed by his relentless climb to the top. When the murder became headline news, speculation ran wild. Some whispered that it was revenge, others claimed it was greed, and a few believed Hayes had been silenced because of a dangerous secret he planned to reveal. The police, however, focused on one suspect almost immediately. Claire Duvall, the young housekeeper who had only worked in Hayes's mansion for half a year, was discovered with her fingerprints on the weapon that ended Hayes's life: a heavy crystal decanter taken from his private bar. To investigators, the evidence was straightforward, the motive clear. Claire was a struggling woman with mounting debts, working for a man who could easily become her target of anger. The narrative was compelling and clean, but to Ben Matlock, it smelled of convenience. Cases wrapped too neatly often hid tangled webs beneath the surface. Matlock's decision to step into the case was not simple. Retirement had dulled his appetite for the grinding pace of trials. Yet something about Claire's situation gnawed at him. The image of a young woman trapped in the weight of a crime she swore she did not commit stirred memories of past clients who had faced the same fate. He studied the initial reports and noted the oddities: the timing of the security shutdown, the placement of the weapon, and Claire's lack of access to the private bar where the decanter was normally kept. Each detail told a different story than the one painted by the authorities. As he accepted the case, Matlock knew he was walking into more than just a murder trial. He was stepping into the fractured world of Franklin Hayes, where wealth, betrayal, and ambition collided. And somewhere within that world, hidden behind layers of deception, was the real killer waiting to be revealed. Claire Duvall's world unraveled the moment police officers placed her in handcuffs. Overnight, she had gone from a quiet, unnoticed housekeeper to the prime suspect in one of the city's most sensational cases. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. Headlines painted her as a desperate woman who had snapped, and prosecutors wasted no time building a narrative that painted her guilt as inevitable. To the public, it seemed straightforward. Her fingerprints on the weapon, her financial troubles, and her presence in the mansion on the night of Hayes's death. But to Ben Matlock, the details felt rehearsed, almost as if someone had carefully placed them where the world would find them. Digging into her life, Matlock discovered Claire's debts had indeed been staggering. Medical bills from her late mother and unpaid loans had left her cornered financially. The perfect profile for someone prosecutors could portray as having motive. Yet just weeks before the murder, all of those debts had vanished. Creditors reported full payments made through transfers from a source Claire could not identify. She denied receiving help from family or friends, and her modest paycheck as a housekeeper could not explain it either. To Matlock, this was a thread worth pulling. If someone had erased her debts, it could have been an intentional move to make her look complicit or to use her as a pawn. The crime scene itself offered more unanswered questions. The decanter had been wiped and cleaned before, yet Claire's prints remained clear, almost too clear. Matlock noted that Claire had handled the object only once, during a routine cleaning when she had been asked to dust Hayes's bar weeks earlier. Why would her prints survive so perfectly through multiple uses by Hayes himself? The forensic timeline didn't match. Either someone had planted the evidence or they had found a way to preserve her prints long enough to make her look guilty. Even the mansion's security system raised suspicion. Hayes's estate was known for being protected by state-of-the-art technology, cameras at every entrance, sensors throughout the halls, and a digital lock system on the main doors. On the night of the murder, the system was disabled 5 minutes before Hayes's death. That level of precision required inside knowledge or technical expertise. Claire possessed neither. She had never been trained on the system, and her job had never given her access to those controls. Yet prosecutors insisted she must have figured out a way, dismissing the technical details as irrelevant to the larger story they wanted the jury to believe. Matlock began tracing Hayes's relationships, and what he found only deepened his doubts about Claire's guilt. The victim had been involved in bitter disputes with his partners, losing and gaining fortunes depending on which side of the deal he stood. At least 3 of his associates had reasons to want him gone, ranging from financial ruin to personal betrayal. Any of them could have engineered the crime, yet none were being investigated. The case was being forced into a narrow frame that made Claire the obvious choice, while more powerful suspects escaped scrutiny. For Matlock, the growing puzzle was clear. Someone had gone to great lengths to design a narrative, one that positioned Claire as the perfect scapegoat. Every piece of evidence against her carried an undertone of manipulation. To expose the truth, Matlock would need to unravel not only the mystery of Hayes's death, but also the carefully laid traps meant to bury the real killer. The deeper Ben Matlock pushed into the case, the more the layers of deception revealed themselves. His investigation into Claire's mysteriously cleared debts led him down a trail of bank transfers, each one designed to vanish behind shell accounts and fabricated company names. With persistence, he traced the origin to a financial structure tied to Victor Sloan, Franklin Hayes's closest business associate. To the public, Sloan was the loyal partner who stood at Hayes's side for decades, always appearing supportive and unwavering. But within Hayes's empire, whispers suggested Sloan was as calculating as the man he worked for, if not more. The discovery was enough to make Matlock pause. If Sloan had been secretly paying off Claire's debts, the question was not simply why, but when the arrangement had been made. The timing, only weeks before Hayes's death, suggested the debt relief was less an act of kindness and more a move on a chessboard already set in motion. Matlock turned his attention to Sloan's alibi. On the night of Hayes's death, Sloan had been photographed and seen by witnesses at a charity gala across the city. The gala seemed airtight proof of his innocence, reinforced by the testimony of several respected attendees. Yet, when Matlock examined security logs from the event, a troubling detail surfaced. During the evening, a blackout occurred that lasted 15 minutes. Security cameras, normally reliable, recorded nothing during that span. It was a coincidence, too perfectly aligned with the timeline of Hayes's murder, a window that gave Sloan just enough opportunity to slip away unnoticed. Though others insisted the blackout was caused by technical issues, Matlock suspected manipulation. For someone with Sloan's resources, arranging a brief disappearance was well within reach. The financial motive was equally strong. Hayes and Sloan had been preparing a deal involving international properties, but Hayes had abruptly pulled out, leaving Sloan burdened with massive losses. Matlock obtained fragments of emails exchanged between them, full of tension and veiled threats. Sloan stood to gain not only revenge by removing Hayes, but also full control of their shared projects, many of which were collapsing under scrutiny. Still, evidence was not proof. Matlock knew the jury would not convict Sloan based on circumstantial suspicions. The prosecution continued painting Claire as the violent employee who let her desperation push her into murder. Against such a neatly tied story, Matlock needed more than threads. He needed something that exposed the deliberate staging of evidence. The turning point came when he re-examined Hayes's private office. Among the clutter of contracts and notes, Matlock discovered a series of cryptic entries in a leather-bound journal. Hayes had scribbled words and dates that hinted at a larger conspiracy, repeatedly referencing something called Project Meridian. The entries were vague, but the tone was urgent, as if Hayes had been gathering material to use against someone close to him. One passage stood out, written days before his death. Meridian nearly complete. Sloan suspects. If he discovers I'm finished. The weight of the entry confirmed Matlock's growing theory. Hayes had not been killed by a desperate housekeeper. He had been silenced by someone who feared exposure. With Claire's life hanging in the balance, Matlock now had to piece together how Project Meridian connected to Hayes's murder, and whether Sloan's mask of loyalty concealed the hand that struck the fatal blow. Ben Matlock knew that the key to the entire case rested within the cryptic phrase, Project Meridian. The journal entries hinted at more than just a business venture. They suggested leverage, secrets powerful enough to topple reputations. Hayes had been gathering files and recording details, and Matlock was certain those files were the reason he was silenced. He requested access to Hayes's personal study once more, determined to search through every overlooked drawer, safe, and hidden compartment. What he found was not a neatly labeled folder, but a collection of encrypted USB drives tucked behind false paneling in the desk. The drives contained spreadsheets, offshore banking records, and coded notes linking Sloan to illegal transfers and hidden political contributions. Project Meridian was not property development. It was a massive scheme involving money laundering and influence over city officials. This discovery changed everything. Sloan's motive was no longer just financial frustration over a failed deal. It was survival. If Hayes had gone public with this information, Sloan would have faced ruin and prison. The murder now carried the sharp edge of desperation. Still, the jury could not be swayed with speculation alone. Matlock needed tangible proof that tied Sloan directly to the staged crime scene. That proof came unexpectedly from the murder weapon itself. The crystal decanter, still central to the prosecution's case, had undergone further testing after Matlock pressed for a new forensic review. This time, under more advanced analysis, technicians discovered microscopic fibers embedded along the rim, traces from a pair of gloves. The fibers did not match anything Claire owned or had access to, but they fit a rare brand of imported leather gloves favored by high-end businessmen. Records from a luxury boutique confirmed that Victor Sloan had purchased a pair of those gloves only a month before Hayes's death. Someone had wiped the decanter clean, but they had overlooked the small fibers trapped where cloth had rubbed against glass. Matlock built his argument piece by piece. Claire had no access to the private bar, no technical knowledge to disable security systems, and no reason to believe her debts would vanish unless someone else had orchestrated it. Sloan, on the other hand, had motive through Hayes's journal, opportunity through the blackout at the gala, and now forensic traces connecting him to the weapon. Yet Sloan's defense team anticipated every move. They painted Sloan as a victim of Hayes's paranoia, arguing that the financial records were taken out of context and that the gloves could have been handled by countless people. They doubled down on the image of Claire as a bitter employee, insisting the evidence pointed clearly in her direction. In court, the pressure mounted. The judge demanded clarity, the jury leaned toward doubt, and the media spun every revelation into headline drama. Just as Sloan seemed ready to slip free of suspicion, Matlock produced one last critical piece. A digital expert hired to decrypt Hayes's files uncovered an audio recording hidden among the documents. It contained Hayes's voice confronting Sloan, accusing him of betrayal and threatening to release Project Meridian. The response from Sloan was chilling and left no doubt of intent. Matlock now had more than scattered evidence. He had the victim's own words and the killer as damning reaction. The courtroom grew tense as Ben Matlock prepared to unveil the final evidence. The trial had stretched for weeks, each day filled with arguments, witnesses, and conflicting narratives that left the jury torn between two possible versions of the truth. Claire Duvall, the accused, sat silently, her future hanging in the balance, while Victor Sloan maintained the calm, polished demeanor of a man who believed himself untouchable. The prosecution had painted Claire as a desperate woman with nothing left to lose, but Matlock knew that the evidence he was about to reveal would shatter that illusion and strip away Sloan's carefully constructed facade. The recording found in Hayes's encrypted files was unlike anything presented before. It captured Hayes confronting Sloan in his office only days before the murder. Hayes accused Sloan of siphoning millions through Project Meridian and threatened to expose the scheme to the authorities. Sloan's voice was steady, almost mocking, as he responded that Hayes would never live long enough to ruin him. The jury listened in stunned silence as the words played out in the courtroom, each sentence punctuated by the undeniable reality of Hayes's fear and Sloan's menace. When the recording ended, the room was still, the weight of the evidence pressing down on everyone present. Matlock emphasized the timeline with precision. The blackout at the gala provided Sloan with the opportunity to leave unnoticed. The financial trail showed his motive, woven through fraudulent accounts and disappearing funds. The forensic fibers on the decanter tied him physically to the crime scene, while Claire's fingerprints, Matlock argued, had been deliberately planted. Combined with the recording, the pieces formed a puzzle that left no room for doubt. It was no longer a story of a desperate housekeeper lashing out, but of a powerful man eliminating the one person who could expose his empire of corruption. Sloan's defense team fought to discredit the evidence, suggesting the recording was manipulated or that Hayes's threats were exaggerated. But the tide had shifted. Jurors who once leaned toward Claire's guilt now exchanged looks that reflected suspicion and anger toward Sloan. Reporters scribbled furiously as the legendary lawyer dismantled the image of loyalty Sloan had crafted for years. The prosecution, cornered by Matlock's revelations, struggled to recover, their narrative collapsing under the weight of new truths. When the verdict was finally read, Claire wept as she was declared not guilty. Sloan, once a man of influence and respect, was convicted of murder and financial crimes. His downfall was immediate, his empire crumbling as associates distanced themselves and authorities seized his assets. The courtroom erupted with the chaos of cameras flashing, voices shouting, and the overwhelming sense that justice had been served. Yet for Matlock, the case left lingering shadows. Project Meridian was only partially understood, its full scope hidden in layers of secrecy that even Hayes's files had not fully unraveled. Some documents hinted at political figures and international accounts, threads too complex to pursue within the limits of one trial. Though Sloan had been exposed, others involved in the scheme remained untouched, their identities locked away in mysteries Hayes had only begun to uncover. As Matlock walked away from the courthouse, he knew he had once again defended the innocent and revealed the truth. But he also recognized that justice had only scratched the surface. Franklin Hayes's death had unmasked one villain, but the deeper network of corruption remained, waiting for the day it would rise again. The legend of Ben Matlock had grown, yet the world he fought against proved as dangerous and secretive as ever, reminding him that every victory was only part of a much larger battle.